Enzo Castellano's hand froze on the back entrance door handle of Bellanote, his upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. Through the crack in the door, he could hear Brad Morrison's voice cutting through the kitchen noise like a blade. "Listen here, Kaya. I don't care what sob story you're spinning about your sick grandmother. You people always have some excuse when you mess up orders. Maybe if you spent less time on your phone and more time actually working, you wouldn't be such a disappointment." Enzo's jaw clenched. He'd come to do a surprise inspection of his restaurant, something he did monthly to ensure quality. But this was not what he expected to find. Through the small window he could see Kaya Davis, one of his waitresses, standing with her shoulders straight despite the verbal assault. Her beautiful dark skin seemed to glow under the harsh kitchen lights, and her natural curls were pulled back in a neat bun. She wore the restaurant's black uniform with dignity, even as Morrison continued his tirade. "And another thing," Morrison sneered, stepping closer to Kaya in an intimidating manner. "I've been getting complaints about your attitude. Customers don't want to be served by someone who looks like they'd rather be anywhere else. Maybe you should consider finding work somewhere more suitable for your kind." Enzo's blood turned to ice. In that moment, watching this beautiful, strong woman being degraded in his restaurant by his manager, something primal awakened in him. Nobody, absolutely nobody, disrespected his people. And somehow, without even knowing her story, Kaya Davis had just become his people. The dawn of the Castellano family was about to remind everyone exactly who owned this establishment. If you want to see how this powerful mafia boss handles the situation and what happens when he steps out of the shadows to protect Kaya, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this one to life. 3 hours earlier, Kaya Davis had started her shift at Bellanote with hope in her heart. She needed this job desperately. Her grandmother's medical bills were mounting, and her little brother, Marcus, needed new school supplies. At 24, she was the sole provider for her family after their parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. Bellanote was the most prestigious restaurant in downtown Chicago, known for its authentic Italian cuisine and elegant atmosphere. The tips were good, and usually the work environment was professional. Usually. Everything changed when Brad Morrison became the day manager 3 weeks ago. From day one, he'd made it clear that he didn't think Kaya belonged there. His comments started small, questioning her competence, making snide remarks about her appearance, always finding fault with her work, even when other staff members praised her efficiency and warm customer service. "Kaya, table 7 is asking for you specifically," said Maria, another waitress, as she passed by with a tray of appetizers. "The elderly Italian couple. They said you made their anniversary dinner perfect last week." Kaya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she loved her job, the connections she made with customers, the way she could make someone's day special with attentive service and genuine care. She had always been good with people, speaking 3 languages fluently and having an intuitive understanding of what customers needed. As she approached table 7, she recognized Mr. and Mrs. Benedetti, a sweet couple in their 70s who came in monthly to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Mrs. Benedetti's face lit up when she saw Kaya approaching. "Bella ragazza," Mrs. Benedetti exclaimed, using the Italian phrase for beautiful girl. "We specifically requested you. You made our last visit so special." "It's wonderful to see you both again," Kaya replied warmly, her genuine smile making her dark eyes sparkle. "Are we celebrating another month of love today?" 52 years tomorrow," Mr. Benedetti said proudly, reaching across to squeeze his wife's hand. "And we want the same table, the same wine, and the same perfect service you gave us last time." As Kaya took their order, she noticed Brad Morrison watching her from across the dining room. His expression was cold, calculating. She had learned to recognize that look. It meant trouble was coming. She finished serving the Benedettis and was heading back to the kitchen when Morrison intercepted her path. "Davis, my office now." Her stomach dropped, but she followed him to the small manager's office behind the kitchen. Morrison closed the door and turned to face her, his pale face flushed with what looked like barely contained anger. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low and menacing. You think you're special, don't you? Getting requested by customers, speaking your little foreign languages, acting like you own this place. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Morrison, Kaya replied carefully, keeping her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. Your job is to serve food and keep your mouth shut, not to get cozy with customers like you're part of their family. This is a high-end establishment, not some neighborhood diner where you can be all friendly and casual. Kaya felt her temper flare, but forced herself to remain calm. The customers seemed to appreciate personal service. My reviews have been consistently excellent. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Don't get smart with me. I know your type. You think you can charm your way through life, but this isn't the kind of place where that works. Maybe you should consider finding employment somewhere more appropriate. The implication in his words was clear, and Kaya felt a familiar ache in her chest. The same feeling she'd experienced countless times throughout her life when people made assumptions about her based on the color of her skin. I've never had any complaints about my work, she said firmly, finding her strength. In fact, I've received several commendations from the previous management. Well, I'm the management now, Morrison snapped, and I'm telling you to tone it down. Stop trying to be everyone's friend and just do your job. Quietly. Before Kaya could respond, there was a knock on the office door. Morrison yanked it open to find Maria standing there looking nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but Table 7 is asking for Kaya again. They want to speak with her about arranging a private party for their anniversary. Morrison's face turned red. Tell them she's busy. Someone else can handle it. But they specifically asked for. I don't care what they asked for, Morrison exploded, his voice carrying into the kitchen. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You people always think the rules don't apply to you. The kitchen fell silent. Several staff members turned to stare, and Kaya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. Morrison had just humiliated her in front of her coworkers, and his choice of words, "you people," left no doubt about his meaning. What none of them knew was that Enzo Castellano had just entered through the back door and was listening to every word. Enzo remained in the shadows of the back hallway, his fury building with each word that came out of Morrison's mouth. As the head of the Castellano crime family, he was used to dealing with disrespect, usually with swift and permanent consequences. But this was different. This wasn't about business or territory or power. This was about basic human dignity. And watching Morrison degrade Kaya was igniting something protective and primal in his chest. He studied Kaya through the kitchen service window. Even under Morrison's verbal assault, she held herself with grace and dignity. Her posture was straight, her chin lifted, and though he could see the hurt in her dark eyes, she wasn't backing down. There was strength in her that called to something deep in his soul. Enzo had built his empire on respect and loyalty. His restaurants, his legitimate businesses, were supposed to be safe havens where people were treated with dignity. The fact that this was happening under his own roof in his own establishment was unacceptable. You know what your problem is, Davis? Morrison continued, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. You think because you can speak a little Italian and smile pretty, you're better than what you are. But at the end of the day, you're just help, and help should know their place. That was the final straw. Enzo stepped out of the shadows and walked into the kitchen with the quiet confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The kitchen staff immediately noticed him. His presence was impossible to ignore. At 6'3", with broad shoulders, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, he commanded attention without saying a word. "Good afternoon," he said calmly, his voice carrying just enough authority to make everyone freeze. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Morrison spun around, his face going pale as he took in Enzo's appearance. Something about the man's bearing, the way he carried himself, the expensive cut of his clothes screamed danger and power. "I'm sorry, sir, but the kitchen is employees only," Morrison stammered, trying to regain his composure. "If you're looking for the dining room, I'm exactly where I need to be," Enzo interrupted smoothly. His dark eyes swept the kitchen before settling on Kaya. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he'd thought. Her skin was a rich, warm brown that seemed to glow under the lights, and her eyes held intelligence and strength despite the situation she'd just endured. "You must be Kaya Davis," he said, his voice gentling as he addressed her directly. "I've heard excellent things about your work." Kaya blinked in surprise. She had no idea who this man was, but something about his presence made the entire atmosphere in the kitchen shift. Morrison, who had been so aggressive moments before, now looked nervous and uncertain. "I'm sorry, sir, but who are you?" Morrison demanded, trying to reassert his authority. Enzo turned his attention back to the manager, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm Enzo Castellano. I own this restaurant." The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison's face went from pale to ashen as the implications hit him. The kitchen staff exchanged glances, and Kaya felt her heart skip a beat. The owner. She had just witnessed her manager humiliating her in front of the actual owner of the restaurant. "Mr. Castellano," Morrison began, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know you were coming in today. I was just handling a personnel issue." "Is that what you call it?" Enzo's voice was deadly quiet, because from where I was standing, it sounded like harassment. "No, sir. You misunderstood. I was simply giving feedback about professional standards." "Professional standards?" Enzo stepped closer to Morrison, and the manager instinctively backed up. "Let me tell you about professional standards, Morrison. Professional standards mean treating every employee with respect. Professional standards mean recognizing talent and dedication when you see it. Professional standards mean never ever using language that demeans someone based on their race." Morrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I never said anything about race." "You people," Enzo quoted back at him, "know their place? More appropriate?" His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath that made everyone in the kitchen hold their breath. "Did you think I was deaf, Morrison?" Kaya watched this exchange with growing amazement. This powerful, intimidating man was defending her. She could see the barely controlled anger in his dark eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, and she realized that Enzo Castellano was furious on her behalf. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Morrison tried again. "The only misunderstanding here is how you got the impression that this behavior would be tolerated in my establishment." Enzo's voice cut through Morrison's excuses like a blade. "Miss Davis, would you please join me in the dining room? I'd like to speak with you privately." Kaya nodded, still stunned by the turn of events. As she moved to follow Enzo, Morrison grabbed her arm. "Now wait just a minute." Enzo's hand shot out and gripped Morrison's wrist with enough force to make the man wince and immediately release Kaya. "Touch her again," Enzo said in a voice so quiet and dangerous that it made the hair on the back of Kaya's neck stand up. "And you'll discover exactly why people in this city know better than to cross the Castellano family." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Morrison's face went white as the full implications of who he was dealing with became clear. The Castellano name carried weight in Chicago. Everyone knew they were connected, powerful, and not people you wanted as enemies. Enzo released Morrison's wrist and turned to Kaya, his expression immediately softening. "Shall we?" As they walked toward the dining room, Kaya could feel every eye in the kitchen following them. Her mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. The owner of the restaurant, who was apparently connected to one of Chicago's most powerful families, had just defended her against Morrison's racism and was now asking to speak with her privately. She had no idea what came next, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like someone was on her side. Enzo led Kaya to a quiet corner table in the dining room away from the lunch crowd. He pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy, waiting until she was seated before taking his own seat across from her. Up close, she could see the details that marked him as dangerous. The scar along his left temple, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, the expensive watch that probably cost more than she made in a year. "First," he said, his voice gentle but serious, "I want to apologize. What you experienced today should never happen in any workplace, but especially not in one of my establishments." Morrison's behavior was completely unacceptable. Kaya found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "Thank you for stepping in. I wasn't sure how to handle the situation. You handled it with more grace than he deserved, Enzo replied, and she could see genuine admiration in his dark eyes. I've been watching you work. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, seeing her expression. I do surprise inspections of all my businesses. Your customer service is exceptional. The way you interact with guests, your attention to detail, your professionalism, it's exactly what this restaurant should represent. Warmth spread through Kaya's chest at his words. After weeks of Morrison's constant criticism, hearing genuine praise felt like water in a desert. I love this job, she said honestly. The customers, the atmosphere, the chance to make someone's day special is what I'm good at. It shows. Enzo leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on her. Tell me about yourself, Kaya. What brought you to Bella Note? Something about his tone, the way he said her name, made her feel safe enough to open up. I'm supporting my family, my grandmother and my little brother. Our parents died 2 years ago, and I'm all they have left. She saw something shift in Enzo's expression, a flash of understanding, of shared pain. I'm sorry for your loss. That's a heavy responsibility for someone so young. I'm 24, she said, lifting her chin slightly. And I can handle it. I just need the opportunity to work without being harassed. You'll have it, Enzo said firmly. Morrison won't be a problem anymore. Before Kaya could ask what he meant, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her heart sink. It was from her grandmother's nurse. I'm sorry, she said, looking up at Enzo with worry in her eyes. My grandmother's in the hospital. I need to go, Enzo said immediately, standing up. Family comes first, always. Is your shift covered? Don't worry about anything here. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my personal number. If you need anything at all, you call me. Kaya took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Mr. Castellano, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. His voice was firm but kind. And call me Enzo. As Kaya hurried to gather her things, she didn't see the way Enzo's expression hardened as he watched Morrison through the kitchen window. The manager was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated, probably trying to figure out how to spin the situation in his favor. Enzo had built his reputation on loyalty and respect. People who worked for him were under his protection, and anyone who threatened that protection faced consequences. Morrison had just made a very dangerous enemy. 20 minutes later, Kaya was sitting in the hospital waiting room, holding her grandmother's frail hand. Grandma Rose had raised her after their parents died, and at 78, she was the strongest woman Kaya knew. But diabetes and heart problems were taking their toll. How's work, baby? Grandma Rose asked weakly. It's fine, Grandma. Don't worry about that. Just focus on getting better. That boy, Marcus, called. Said he needs money for a school trip. I told him we'd figure it out. Kaya's heart clenched. Marcus was only 16, and she was determined to give him every opportunity their parents would have wanted him to have. But between the medical bills, rent, and daily expenses, money was always tight. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How is your grandmother? If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Enzo. She stared at the message, surprised by the thoughtfulness. In her experience, bosses didn't usually check on employees' personal emergencies. But then again, Enzo Castellano wasn't like any boss she'd ever had. She texted back, She's stable. Thank you for asking. I should be able to work tomorrow. His response came quickly. Take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting. Meanwhile, back at Bella Note, Enzo was having a very different conversation with Brad Morrison. They were in the manager's office, door closed, and Morrison was sweating despite the air conditioning. Mr. Castellano, I want you to know that I have the utmost respect for all our employees. Stop talking, Enzo said quietly, and Morrison's mouth snapped shut. I'm going to explain something to you very clearly, and I want you to listen carefully. Enzo stood up and walked around the desk, his presence filling the small office. Kaya Davis is under my personal protection now. That means if she experiences any further harassment, discrimination, or retaliation of any kind, I will hold you personally responsible. Morrison's face was pale. Of course, sir, I understand completely. I don't think you do. Enzo's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. The Castellano family has a reputation in this city. We protect what's ours, and as of today, Kaya is ours. The implications hung heavy in the air. Morrison knew exactly what kind of family he was dealing with, and the threat was crystal clear. Furthermore, Enzo continued, you will treat every employee in this restaurant with respect and professionalism. Any complaints about discrimination or harassment will come directly to me. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Absolutely clear. Good. Enzo straightened his tie and headed for the door. Oh, and Morrison, if I hear about any rumors or gossip regarding this conversation or Miss Davis's employment, you'll find yourself looking for work in a city very far from Chicago, permanently. As Enzo left the restaurant, he couldn't stop thinking about Kaya. Her strength in the face of Morrison's abuse, the way she'd spoken about her family, the brief moment when their hands had touched. Something about her had awakened a protective instinct he'd never felt before, and he was determined to make sure she never faced that kind of treatment again. What he didn't expect was how much he was already looking forward to seeing her again. 2 days later, Kaya returned to work with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Her grandmother was stable and back home, but the medical bills had added another layer of financial stress. She needed this job more than ever, but she wasn't sure what kind of reception she'd receive after the incident with Morrison. She was surprised to find that Morrison was nowhere to be seen during her shift. When she asked Maria about it, the other waitress just shrugged. He called in sick yesterday and today, probably embarrassed about what happened with the owner. Kaya spent the day working with a sense of relief she hadn't felt in weeks. Without Morrison's constant criticism and hostile presence, she was able to focus on what she did best, providing excellent service and making customers feel welcome. It was during the dinner rush that she saw him again. Enzo Castellano walked into the dining room like he owned the place, which she reminded herself he did. He was dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, this one navy blue, and he moved with the same quiet confidence that had impressed her before. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and he smiled, a real warm smile that made her heart skip a beat. He was seated at a table in her section, and she took a moment to compose herself before approaching. "Good evening, Mr. Castellano," she said professionally, though she couldn't quite hide the warmth in her voice. "Enzo," he corrected gently. "How is your grandmother?" "Much better, thank you. She's home and resting. I'm glad to hear it." He studied her face carefully. "And how are you really?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked how she was and actually wanted to hear the answer? "I'm okay," she said, then found herself being more honest. "Better than I've been in weeks, actually. It's nice to work without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells." Something dark flashed in Enzo's eyes. "You'll never have to feel that way here again. I promise you that." The intensity in his voice made her believe him completely. There was something about Enzo Castellano that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced since her parents died. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, trying to return to professional ground. "Actually," he said, glancing around the busy restaurant, "I was hoping you might join me for a few minutes when your shift ends, if you're comfortable with that." Kaya hesitated. Everything about the situation was unusual. The owner of the restaurant asking to spend time with her, the way he looked at her like she was someone important, the protective way he'd handled Morrison. But there was something about Enzo that made her want to say yes. "I get off at 9 o'clock, she said. "Perfect. I'll wait." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Kaya found herself glancing toward Enzo's table throughout the evening, and each time she caught him watching her work with an expression of admiration, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. At 9 o'clock sharp, she finished her closing duties and found Enzo waiting by the front entrance. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, making him look slightly less intimidating, but no less attractive. "There's a cafe down the street that stays open late," he mentioned casually. Care for some coffee? They walked the few blocks, their conversation flowing easily, and Ka was genuinely surprised at how comfortable she felt talking to him. Enzo asked thoughtful questions about her family, what her goals were, what she was interested in, and he listened intently to every word she said. The cafe was small and inviting, the lighting dim, and soft jazz music filled the air. They found a cozy corner table, and Enzo took the initiative to order coffee for both of them. Can I ask you something? Ka asked, her hands wrapped securely around her warm mug. Anything at all. Why did you step in the other day? I mean, I'm really grateful, but you don't even know me. Enzo paused for a long moment, carefully considering how to answer. My father taught me that how you treat people who can't defend themselves speaks volumes about your character. Morrison was abusing his power, and you were handling the situation with far more grace than he deserved. It wasn't the first time, Ka admitted quietly. He'd been making comments for weeks. I needed the job too much to make waves. You shouldn't have to tolerate that from anyone, Enzo said, a sharp edge to his voice. No one should ever have to. Is that why Morrison hasn't been at work lately? Enzo's expression became carefully guarded, giving nothing away. Morrison and I had a conversation about appropriate behavior in the workplace. I believe he understood my expectations perfectly. Something in his tone made Ka suspect there was far more to that conversation than he was letting on, but she decided not to push it. Instead, she found herself studying his features, the strong, defined jawline, the intelligent, dark eyes, the subtle curve of his mouth when he was deep in thought. What about you? She asked, changing the subject. What made you want to own restaurants? Family business, he responded simply. My father believed in having legitimate enterprises alongside other interests. The restaurants give me a chance to create something positive, places where people can come together, feel welcomed, and enjoy themselves. Other interests. Enzo met her gaze directly, his expression unreadable. I think you're smart enough to know that the Castellaniano family has interests that extend beyond the restaurant business. The sheer honesty of his statement should have frightened her. She was sitting across from a man who had just, in essence, admitted to being involved in organized crime. But instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of trust. Whatever else Enzo Castellano might be involved in, he had been there to protect her when she needed it most. Does that frighten you? He asked softly, his eyes searching hers. Ka considered the question seriously, weighing her response. It probably should, she said finally, choosing her words carefully. But you've shown me more respect and kindness in 3 days than most people do in months. So no, it doesn't frighten me. Something subtle shifted in Enzo's expression, a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and something warmer that made her breath catch in her throat. You're remarkable, he said softly, his voice full of genuine admiration. Do you even realize that? Before Ka could respond, her phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Marcus's number, and she felt that familiar pang of worry in her chest. I'm sorry. I need to take this. This is my brother, Ka. Marcus's voice was tight with anxiety when she answered. I'm at the police station. I didn't do anything wrong, I swear. But they're saying I was with some guys who were shoplifting. Slow down, Ka said, her heart racing in her chest. Which police station are you at? Okay. Enzo had been watching her with growing concern, and as soon as she hung up the phone, he immediately leaned forward, his expression serious. What's wrong? What happened? My brother's been arrested, she explained. It's probably just a misunderstanding, but I need to go and get him out. She started to stand up, her mind already racing, trying to figure out the logistics of the situation. Bail money she didn't have, a lawyer she couldn't afford. I'll drive you, Enzo said, already on his feet. You don't have to do that, Ka protested weakly. His voice was firm but gentle. Let me help you with this, Ka. 20 minutes later, they were walking into the police station, and Ka was amazed at how quickly things progressed once Enzo introduced himself. Doors seemed to open on their own. Hushed conversations were taking place in corners, and within an hour, Marcus was released with all charges dropped. As they drove home, Marcus kept glancing back and forth between Ka and Enzo with a mixture of curiosity and exhaustion. "So, you're my sister's boss?" he asked from the back seat of Enzo's expensive car. "I am," Enzo replied, his tone friendly. "And you must be the brother she's so incredibly proud of." Marcus looked genuinely surprised by his words. "She actually talks about me?" he asked Ka. "Constantly," she said, smiling gently. "She says you're the smartest person she knows." Ka felt her heart swell with affection at the natural and easy way Enzo interacted with Marcus, treating him with respect and genuine interest. When they arrived at their small apartment building, Enzo walked them right to the door. "Thank you," Kaya said, meaning it more deeply than she could ever express, "for everything tonight. I really appreciate it." "You don't need to thank me," Enzo said. His eyes were soft in the dim light of the hallway. "Just take care of yourself, Ka. I'll see you at work." As she watched him drive away, Ka realized that everything in her life had just irrevocably changed. Enzo Castellaniano was undeniably dangerous, immensely powerful, and completely out of her league. But he was also undeniably kind, fiercely protective, and he looked at her in a way that made her feel like she was something precious and valuable. For the first time in years, she truly felt like someone was on her side, someone who had her back no matter what. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that almost seemed too good to be true, like something out of a dream. Morrison had mysteriously resigned from his position, citing vague personal reasons. And the new manager, Sofia Reyes, was everything Morrison wasn't: professional, fair-minded, and she actually seemed to value Ka's contributions to the restaurant, soliciting her advice and ideas. More importantly, Enzo had become a regular presence in her life. He stopped by the restaurant several times a week, always finding some plausible reason to check on operations that conveniently required him to speak with Ka. Their conversations grew longer and more personal each time, and she found herself looking forward to his visits with a mixture of anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. It was a Thursday evening when everything came to a head. Ka was just finishing up her shift when she noticed a man sitting at the bar who had been watching her intently all night. He was well dressed, but there was a certain edge to him that made her deeply uncomfortable. And as she walked past his table, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Hey, beautiful," he said, his voice smooth and suggestive. "How about you and me go somewhere private when you get off work? I'm very generous." "I'm sorry, but I'm really not interested," Ka said firmly, trying to pull her wrist away from his grasp. His grip only tightened. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, his tone turning insistent. "I tip very well for good service." The blatant implication in his words made her skin crawl with disgust, and she was just about to call for help when a familiar voice cut through the noise of the restaurant. "Is there a problem here?" Enzo appeared beside their table as if from nowhere, his very presence immediately commanding everyone's attention. He was dressed entirely in black, and there was something in his demeanor that caused the entire restaurant to fall silent. The man at the bar looked up at Enzo and immediately released Ka's wrist, his bravado instantly gone. "No problem, man," he stammered, avoiding eye contact. "Just talking to the waitress." "The waitress has a name," Enzo said quietly, his voice deceptively calm but carrying a dangerous undertone. "And she's under my protection. I strongly suggest you finish your drink and leave." "Look, I don't want any trouble," the man mumbled, suddenly contrite. "Then don't cause any," Enzo replied, his gaze unwavering. Enzo's hand moved to rest protectively on Ka's lower back, a gesture that was both protective and subtly possessive. "Ka, are you all right?" he asked, his voice softening slightly. She nodded, still shaken by the unwelcome encounter. The man at the bar threw some money on the table and left quickly, clearly recognizing that he was completely outmatched. "Thank you," Ka said, turning to face Enzo, her heart still pounding in her chest. "I could have handled it myself, but you shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing." His dark eyes were still hard with suppressed anger. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you in any way?" "No, I'm fine," she reassured him. Just shaken up a little. Enzo's expression softened as he looked at her, and she could clearly see the concern etched in his eyes. Come on, let me take you home, he said gently. During the drive to her apartment, Ka found herself studying Enzo's profile in the dim light of the car. The way he had handled the situation at the restaurant, the quiet authority he possessed, the immediate and instinctive response to protect her, had awakened something deep inside her, something that she had been trying to ignore for weeks. Enzo, she said softly as he pulled up in front of her building. Yes. He turned to face her, giving her his undivided attention. Can I ask you something personal? Enzo hesitated for a long moment before responding. Anything at all. Why me? She blurted out, the question she had been holding back finally escaping. I mean, you could have any woman you wanted. You're powerful, successful, attractive. She trailed off, feeling a blush rise in her cheeks. Enzo was quiet for another long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was softer and more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Ka? She shook her head, completely unsure of what to expect. I see strength, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Real strength. Not the kind that comes from power or money, but the kind that comes from surviving profound loss and still choosing to be kind and compassionate. I see intelligence and grace and a heart that's big enough to take care of everyone around you, he continued, his eyes fixed on hers. He reached over and gently touched her cheek, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. I see a woman who makes me want to be a better man than I am. The raw honesty in his words took her breath away, leaving her completely speechless. Without even thinking about it, she leaned into his touch, and she saw his eyes darken with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Ka, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I need you to know exactly what you're getting into with me. My world, it's not safe. There are people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt you just to get to me. I know what you are, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. And I know it should scare me, but when I'm with you, I feel safer than I have since my parents died. Something seemed to break in Enzo's expression, and he leaned even closer, his forehead touching hers. You're going to be the death of me, Kaya. You know that, don't you? Is that necessarily a bad thing? She whispered, her lips just inches from his. Instead of answering her question, he kissed her. It was soft and gentle at first, a tentative exploration, but it quickly deepened as she responded, her hands clenching in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, their eyes locked on each other. Come upstairs, she said, the words tumbling out before she could even stop them. Enzo's eyes searched her face, looking for any sign of hesitation or doubt. Are you absolutely sure about this, Ka? I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life, she said, her voice unwavering. As they walked up the stairs to her apartment, Ka felt like she was crossing a line, stepping into a new and unknown territory that would change everything between them forever. But for the first time in years, she was making a decision purely for herself, not out of obligation or necessity, but because she truly wanted it. Because she was falling deeply in love with Enzo Castellano. And despite all the very valid reasons it was dangerous, ill-advised, and incredibly complicated, she simply couldn't bring herself to care. The next morning, Ka woke up in Enzo's arms, feeling more relaxed and content than she had in years. Sunlight was streaming through her bedroom window, and she could hear her grandmother moving around in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she prepared breakfast. I should probably go, Enzo said softly, pressing a tender kiss to her temple. I don't want to make things complicated with your family. Too late for that, Ka said with a smile. Grandma Rose has probably already made enough breakfast for an army. She makes a mean plate of eggs. Sure enough, when they emerged from the bedroom, they found Grandma Rose standing at the stove, happily humming to herself as she cooked. She took one look at them, a knowing smile spreading across her face. You must be Enzo, she said warmly, extending her hand to him. Kaz told me so much about you. It's a true pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Davis, Enzo replied, his natural charm immediately evident as he took her hand and kissed it in an old-fashioned gesture that made her giggle. "Oh, I like this one already," Grandma Rose said to Ka with a wink. "He's got good manners. A rare thing these days." As they all sat around the small kitchen table sharing breakfast, Ka watched Enzo interact with her grandmother with genuine warmth and respect. He asked her about her health, complimented her cooking, and listened attentively to her stories about Ka's childhood with obvious interest. When Marcus stumbled out of his bedroom, still half asleep and disoriented, Enzo greeted him like an old friend, asking about school and his plans for the future. Within minutes, Marcus was telling him all about his dream of studying computer science, and Enzo was offering to help him look at colleges, recommending programs, seamlessly integrating himself into her family. Kaya felt a sense of happiness that she hadn't experienced since before her parents passed away. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly imagine a future where she wasn't carrying all the burden and responsibility alone. But as perfect as the morning was, she knew deep down that their relationship was about to face its biggest test yet. Because loving Enzo Castellaniano meant entering a world where danger was always lurking just beneath the surface, and she was about to discover just how far he was willing to go to protect the people he truly loved. 6 months later, Ka stood in the kitchen of the new house that Enzo had bought for her family, a beautiful and spacious home in a safe, quiet neighborhood, complete with a sprawling garden for Grandma Rose and a dedicated study for Marcus to do his homework. She was wearing a simple white dress and watching through the kitchen window as Enzo patiently taught Marcus how to change the oil in his car. The transition hadn't been without its challenges. There had been difficult and emotional conversations about Enzo's business, about the extensive security measures that were now an unavoidable part of their daily life, and about what it truly meant to be connected to the Castellano family. But through it all, Enzo had been unfailingly patient, honest, and completely devoted to her and her family's well-being, reassuring them and addressing all of their concerns. Grandma Rose appeared beside her at the window, following her gaze to where Enzo was patiently explaining something to Marcus, his brow furrowed in concentration. "That man loves you something fierce, Kaya," she said with deep satisfaction in her voice. "It's plain as day to anyone who looks at you too." "I know, Grandma," Ka replied, unable to suppress the wide smile that spread across her face. "And you love him back even more than I ever thought was possible, don't you?" "I do, Grandma," she admitted, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "I really, really do." "Good," Grandma Rose said firmly. "Life's just too short not to grab hold of love when it finds you, especially the kind of love that makes you stronger instead of smaller." As if he could feel her watching him, Enzo looked up and caught her eye through the window. The smile he gave her was soft and private, filled with unspoken promises and endless possibilities. He said something to Marcus, who grinned and nodded, then started walking toward the house. Ka met him at the back door, and he pulled her into his arms without hesitation, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "What were you two talking about out there?" she asked, tilting her head back to look at him. "I was asking his permission," Enzo said, his dark eyes twinkling with playful mischief. "Permission for what?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Instead of answering her directly, he dropped to one knee right there in her grandmother's kitchen, pulling out a small velvet ring box from his pocket that made her heart stop completely. "Kaya Davis," he said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the obvious emotion in his eyes. "You walked into my restaurant as an employee and somehow, inexplicably, became my everything. You've made me want to be the kind of man you see when you look at me. You inspire me to be better." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Ka could hear Grandma Rose cheering loudly in the background and Marcus whooping with excitement. But all she could focus on was Enzo, this powerful, complex, sometimes dangerous, but always wonderful man who had chosen to love her and her family with every fiber of his being. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Then, louder and with complete certainty, "Yes, absolutely, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Ka thought about how much her life had irrevocably changed since that fateful day when he had walked into the restaurant and overheard Morrison humiliating her. She had gone from feeling utterly powerless, alone, and invisible to being cherished and fiercely protected by a man who would willingly move heaven and earth for her and her family. It certainly wasn't the life she had ever planned or imagined for herself, but it was undeniably better, richer, and more fulfilling than anything she could have possibly dreamed. And as Enzo held her close while her family celebrated joyously around them, Ka knew with unwavering certainty that sometimes the most beautiful and unexpected love stories begin in the most unlikely of places and in the most unexpected ways. This story of unexpected love and protection has now come to its end. If it touched your heart in any way and made you believe in the enduring power of standing up for what's right, please don't hesitate to leave a like and share it with someone who appreciates stories about finding true love in the most unexpected places. We have even more new stories of romance, gripping drama, and incredible transformation coming very soon. So be sure to stay tuned. Until next time, always remember that love has a way of finding us when we least expect it, and that it has the power to change everything in the most beautiful and remarkable ways.